Hello friends, long time no see. Sorry. It has pretty obviously been a while since I posted a new video, and I'm coming in with something completely different than I've ever done before. Hopefully this goes well. I'm really excited about it. A few months ago, I watched a YouTube video on Dixie D'Amelio's music, and I started thinking about how interesting Dixie's entire career is. From the way that it got started to the way that it is now and everything in between, it has not really been a traditional career, which it has pros and cons. And that's exactly what we're gonna look at today. Fun fact, I already filmed this, but I have to film it again because there was an important phone number on my whiteboard that you could see. Whoops. I'm going to give you a bit of a background on the family, starting with Mark D'Amelio. He is the father of the family. He worked as a former Republican candidate for the Connecticut Senate, as well as a business owner. Heidi D'Amelio is the mom, and she is a former model and photographer. Charli D'Amelio is Dixie's younger sister. She was a dancer for 10 years prior to starting her TikTok career. Charli got very popular in TikTok very quickly. As of right now, she has 125.2 million followers on TikTok. That's insane. Most of Charli's content is TikTok dances, a couple challenges, hanging out, really casual sort of videos. But she is arguably the most famous TikToker, and Dixie got famous as a byproduct of Charli becoming famous. Dixie D'Amelio, who is the focus of this video, she has 55.2 million followers on TikTok and 7.39 million on YouTube, so she's certainly not a small influencer, but she is smaller than her sister Charli. The family previously lived in Norwalk, Connecticut before the girls got famous, which then they moved to LA. Constantine, do you need to take a step out, sir? This is a serious environment right now. So Dixie and her career is the main focus of this video. She has had a really interesting start to her career, basing it off of the fact that she got famous as a byproduct of somebody else getting famous, and in turn has had to make that fame work for her. She didn't even really do anything. A lot of people have argued that Charli wasn't even planning on getting famous. Fair enough. She was just posting TikTok videos, and she was some random 15, 16-year-old girl who just got a million bajillion followers. I mean, you can look back and see that she's mostly just posting dancing videos, something that she did before posting TikToks, and all of a sudden she has 125 million people following her. So if Charli wasn't planning on getting famous because of this, I seriously doubt that Dixie was planning on getting famous as a byproduct of her sister getting famous over TikTok videos. So for that reason, Dixie has had kind of a weird start to her career, and it's been interesting to see how that unfolds into the things that she's been trying to do with that fame. I created a timeline of Dixie's career so far, and we're gonna run from the beginning to present day. At some point in 2019, Dixie got famous on TikTok. I don't know exactly when she got popular on TikTok, but it was shortly after Charli did. Charli and Dixie's videos are pretty similar. It's a lot of TikTok dances or making kind of jokey videos, not like comedic skits or playing pranks or anything of that sort. Just videos of them messing around and having fun with their friends, usually fellow TikTokers. The videos arguably don't have a lot of substance, but they're really easy to watch. And if you're looking for quick entertainment, looking at things like a pretty girl or somebody singing or just messing around is quick enough entertainment to get people interested. A lot of the popular content on TikTok is some of that really easy to watch mindless content, and their content fits in really well with that, so people don't have to think when they're watching their content. That's more or less the appeal of it. You can watch somebody who's attractive do something easy and mind-numbing, so you don't have to think about whatever else that you were not wanting to think about, be it school or work or whatever is going on in your life. That easy to watch content is appealing for those reasons, and a lot of people enjoy it. I myself enjoy content that's really easy to watch, maybe not specifically Dixie and Charli's content, but content that's easy to consume that I don't necessarily have to be thinking about. Especially if I'm thinking all day long or I'm really stressed, I don't necessarily want to come home and watch an hour-long documentary. After gaining popularity on TikTok, Dixie's next move was to start posting YouTube videos. Her first YouTube video is posted on April 9th of 2020. Dixie's content on YouTube has been criticized pretty heavily for being boring. I would argue that this is a fair critique, not because Dixie is boring, but because she isn't putting a lot of her own interests or own personality into her videos. It was pretty clear from the beginning that she was doing this because she had a deadline to meet or because she had signed a contract. In some of her earlier videos, I'm not sure about the newer ones, she even mentions the fact that she was filming because in an hour and a half, 2 hours, she needed to turn in footage to her editor so that she could get a video up on time. She was filming just for the sake of filming, not because there was a topic that she was interested in or an exciting event happening or whatever. I don't know if Dixie had any interest in posting YouTube videos to begin with, or if it's something that her managing company told her to do. But there seemed to be a general lack of passion and interest and personality in her videos. So sure, she still has a really large audience on YouTube. 7.39 million followers is not small. But I don't think that her content is going to bring any new audience in because there still isn't a lot of substance in her YouTube videos. YouTube videos tend to do better when there is some kind of topic or interest or passion. It's not really the platform for super mindless content the same way that TikTok is. You can kind of tell if you look on either of those platforms. TikTok is really short videos that you're just supposed to scroll through, and who cares if you even remember the video in a half an hour. YouTube videos try to give a bit more of a long-term impression on the viewer. It's more similar to like a TV show episode where it's supposed to have substance to it. So the lack of personality, the lack of topics, the lack of interest in making YouTube videos probably isn't helping her gain any growth on YouTube or any long-term success. I was not getting to the point, so I'm going to interrupt myself. Long-form and short-form content are fundamentally different, and the points of them are different. It is not new to see creators struggling to go from short-form to long-form content or vice versa. They are different and it's hard to do. Regardless of whether or not Dixie is passionate about long-form content, she's struggling to make that transition, and that was the point I was trying to make. Dixie is also a bit of an actress. Rat TV's Attaway General was released on May 20th of 2020. Dixie played a character named Georgia Henry. She was like the doctor's daughter. The show, as far as I'm aware, is supposed to be like a teen's version of Grey's Anatomy. Kind of. It's a bunch of teens who are working at a hospital. Dixie's character Georgia is like this grungy teen whose dad is like a doctor at the hospital, I think, and her character like doesn't want to be there, isn't really interested in medicine. But as far as I'm aware, Dixie D'Amelio had never acted prior to Attaway General, and most, if not all, of the main roles were played by TikTokers or influencers of other kinds. I don't know if this was a good idea, because acting is a skill that one learns over time with a lot of practice, and if this was the first time really acting for all of these TikTokers, it's no wonder it didn't get a lot of good reviews. Realistically, their target audience wasn't somebody my age. It was probably closer to people in like the 10 to 12 area. From what I found online, the 10 to 12-year-olds did enjoy the show, but the show, specifically the acting, got really heavily critiqued from people my age and older. This makes a lot of sense if you think about it. A lot of people my age and older tend to watch shows based on what's going on in the show and how good the acting is and how immersive those shows feel. A big advertising point in Attaway General was that these popular TikTokers were acting in it. If you can imagine, the first time you act, you're probably not great. So it's not surprising that the acting wasn't good, nor is it surprising that people who aren't really interested in these TikTokers weren't interested in the show if that was one of the key elements of making the show interesting. As far as I'm aware, there is supposed to be another season of Attaway General. I don't know when it's supposed to come out or if the acting is going to be better, but I guess we'll just have to see. Next up on Dixie's career is probably one of the bigger endeavors that she's taken a part in. On June 26, 2020, Dixie released her first ever song, Be Happy. She's since released more songs, but this was the first song that she ever released. From my knowledge, this is also the first song that she ever wrote. So once again, we are seeing her her try something that she is new at very publicly. You're gonna want to keep that in mind for later. Little foreshadowing for you. Dixie's song was pretty heavily critiqued, mostly for being repetitive and surface level. This is very common for new songwriters to do. I mean, the first time you write a song is kind of like the first time you write a poem. It's probably not going to have all the layers that you'll be able to put in later on. So it isn't surprising that her song was pretty surface level. I'm gonna read you some of the lyrics just so that you can get a sense of what I'm talking about. Sometimes I don't want to be happy. Don't hold it against me. If I'm down, just leave me there. Let me be sad. Sun's up, I already want to lay down. Friends calling, I ain't really trying to go out. Don't want to get dressed up to pretend. I could lie and say I'm fine. Maybe you'll stop calling me then. I got chips on my shoulder. Only getting older, so I keep to myself, ain't trying to complain, just don't want to explain it. But sometimes I don't want to be happy. Don't hold it against me. If I'm down, just leave me there and let me be sad. Sometimes I just want to be lonely. Don't need you to hold me. If I'm low, you don't need to care. Let me be sad. So if you didn't catch on, the song is about being sad. The other verses are more of the same, of it being this surface level sadness, something that is very generic. But as I said before, this isn't surprising. This was the first song that she ever wrote. Her next song, One Whole Day, has a lot of the same critiques of it being surface level, but more importantly, it was critiqued for being repetitive. I'm pretty sure you're gonna be able to catch on what I'm talking about. We'd be laying in bed and you'd randomly get up to leave. You would make a lot of time for anyone other than me. The more that I gave, the more you held back. Now I am emotionally starved. You're stuck on your ex, you're stuck in the past. Truth is, you really broke my heart. For one day, I was really sad. For one day, one whole day, I missed you really bad. And a single tear trickled down my face when I threw your shit in the fireplace. I was really sad. For one day, one whole day. Can you see what I mean? A bit repetitive. So besides it being repetitive, something that we established earlier, this song is, once again, a pretty generic song. This song is about being sad, but this time about a breakup. I don't think having simple generic songs when you're starting out is necessarily bad, especially if you're not super comfortable singing, which she's mentioned that maybe she isn't yet, and she still has a lot to work on. Both songwriting and singing are skills that you have to build. If she is new to both of those, then it's not surprising that she's doing stuff that a lot of people would consider is really simple and easy. It's very possible she doesn't yet have the skill to create really poetic and complex lyrics. She might also not yet have the skill to do crazy fun things with her voice that you see a lot of experienced artists doing. So her newest thing besides the reality TV show that we're not gonna talk about in today's video is the podcast. This is a podcast that she does with her sister Charlie. It's a podcast done by Ramble Podcast Network. It's called Two Chicks, and the first episode aired on October 8th, 2020. I listened to the podcast a little bit. It is definitely made for their established audience. I don't think it is made to bring new people in, and I'll explain why. On the podcast, a lot of what they talk about is what's going on in their own personal lives. They've only had a small handful of guests on, so clearly it's not really a podcast focusing on interviews. They don't do a lot of games. The Q&As are based on their life, and it just seems mostly like it's supposed to be for people who are already interested in Charlie and Dixie. The biggest critique I saw from fans was that they don't post enough, or that they don't have enough guests on, so it gets a little boring. We see a lot of podcasts like this of people who already have platforms just creating more content for their established audiences. The goal isn't necessarily to have another separate audience or bring new people to your audience. It's just providing more content for the audience you already have. This isn't like the wrong thing to do. People do it all the time and it's very successful, brings them lots of money, and that's great, but I don't think that this is necessarily going to be successful in providing them with like a long-term solution for work. So as of right now, that's really all that Dixie has done with her career. That's by no means a short list in terms of things you're doing regularly and content you're producing regularly. And it's not like she's been doing this for a long time. She's really only been doing this for 3 years. So I do think it's very likely that we'll see more from Dixie later on. It's a new day and I can't find my black shirt, so I apologize for messing up the continuity. Please Forgive me. So you can see that Dixie's career is pretty fresh. It's only about a few years long. In these few years, she's done quite a few different endeavors, many of which she has continued to do. We've also seen that she's gotten quite a bit of backlash on most, if not everything that she's done. Many a joke being made about the quality of the things that she's putting out. It's really made me think that this fame is quite possibly a double-edged sword for her. A lot of people have made the point that because she has this audience, she should be able to do whatever she wants and be successful in it. But the problem is that she's trying all of these new things for the first time in front of literal millions of people. She's a beginner, so in turn she's performing at a beginner's level, and yet she has an expert's level of eyes on her. I cannot imagine trying a new thing over and over and over and over again in front of millions of people and having to hear all of their opinions constantly. Because of the size of her audience, it seems like people are expecting her to perform at an expert's level, doing things that she's never done before, that she is a beginner at. We've seen this happen many times when social media influencers try to branch out into something that they've never done before. Oftentimes this is music or acting. The same problem arises where they have professional levels eyes on them with a beginner's level skill. People really are not very lenient or understanding of these individuals and the fact that they've never done this before. And I think the reason why people aren't very understanding of this is because that's not typically how fame has worked in the past. Traditionally, people have gotten famous because they have a skill that they are good at and people enjoy, and so they gain popularity from other people enjoying and appreciating their skill. You don't get famous at something that you're not good at. We don't see a lot of famous actors who totally suck at acting. We don't see a lot of famous musicians who totally suck at music. What we're now seeing because of social media is a lot of people getting famous on something that they either don't want to or can't create a career based around. So instead, we're seeing them have an audience and then decide what they want to have a career on, and in turn disappointing their audience almost because it's not what they signed up to see. On top of that, the audience is disappointed that what they are now getting isn't amazing quality because the person doing it is a beginner. We then see these influencers getting made fun of because what they're doing sucks and their audience doesn't like it. So then the influencer has to make the decision of whether or not they want to continue to try and pursue this passion in front of millions with very little skill, or if they want to stop doing it and go back to creating the content that they were making before. Now, if the content that they were making before is not something that they can make a long-term career out of, then all of a sudden their choices change dramatically, and their choices are to continue to get better in front of millions or stop being an influencer in a few years because it's not going to provide you long-term success. I have a theory as to why this process seems to fail so often. The influencer who already has an established audience is branching off into something that, one, they're not very good at, and two, isn't related to the content that they are currently producing, so it's not a guarantee that their audience is going to be interested in it. We've seen influencers be successful in branching off. For example, Dodie Clark has really been successful in music. This was a really pretty direct change. Dodie Clark made a lot of content about music when she was mostly on YouTube, and so it was not really a surprise to her audience when she switched her main interest into music and not into YouTube, which it once was. A less direct example of this is Codeco and Noel Miller. They made comedy commentary videos here on YouTube, and one of the things that they started doing was making joke music videos within their YouTube videos to help enhance what they were doing. So it was really well received from their audience when they started doing stand-up comedy. Similarly, they started making more of the joke music, but independent from the YouTube videos that they had originally been working on. This opened the door for them doing music in general, which is now a huge thing that both Cody and Noel do together. They also do a comedy commentary podcast. So everything that Cody and Noel have done has been directly related to things that their audience was already familiar with and enjoyed. That's why it worked. Really, when we're seeing these influencers fail is when they're trying to branch out into something that their audience is not interested in or they haven't built any foundation on. For example, Gabby Hanna and her poetry or her music. Prior to releasing her poetry book, Gabby didn't show really any interest in poetry on her channel, and so it came really out of the blue, and her fans were a little shocked. So on top of Gabby's poetry being pretty beginner poetry, her audience wasn't prepared for the switch at all and wasn't very interested in it. Her book was still a New York Times bestseller, but that doesn't mean much when you consider how many sections of New York Times bestseller there are. Anybody with millions of followers can release a book and it probably is a New York Times bestseller. There's so many New York Times bestsellers. It seems like every single book is a New York Times bestseller. I don't even know what that means anymore. So what happens when you're trying to build a long-term career off of something that you can't really build a career on? I think the reason that Dixie is struggling to create a long-term career for herself is because her TikTok content is not something that she can go deeper on or expand on very much. So that you can understand where I'm coming from, please enjoy some of her TikTok videos.
Yeah, I miss you, but I got no time for that. You was my little lady, drive me crazy. I was fine with that. Damn, how you just don't play me? I ain't fine with that. Thinking about you daily, smoking crazy. While
So hopefully after watching those TikToks, you are in a similar place to me in thinking, how is she going to go deeper on this and branch out into new things on this? And I would like to talk about potential solutions. If there is a solution, I don't think I have it, but I'll take a guess. The first solution that I think could possibly work is that you slowly start incorporating things into your content that you think could be long-term career opportunities. Dixie seems to be sticking with the musician path. I think that Dixie could have started incorporating music into her TikTok or YouTube videos before releasing her first song so that it was less of a surprise to her audience. I don't think she ever mentioned being interested in music before that music video came out. So if she were to have posted videos of her playing piano or singing or talking about music theory or coming up with lyrics or music challenges, there's a ton of them, her music career might have been received differently. For a lot of people and audiences in general, it's easier to accept smaller changes in content over time than one really big sudden change. Yes, I see the irony in the total content shift in my YouTube videos. We don't have to talk about it. I think by creating some of these smaller changes, we could, one, prepare our audiences for those big changes, and two, get a new audience started that's interested in what you're wanting to do. Add more people in to your audience that you already have who are interested in what you're doing. So that theory is mostly based around reducing the shock that your audience will feel when you try something new. The other one isn't so much about taking away the shock, but rather shifting it into really good shock. For this, you would have to get really, really good at what you want to do off camera before you introduce it at all. Someone could do this by taking a ton of vocal lessons before making a song public. They could write a bunch of practice songs before posting the first one they make. More or less, the idea is to practice a ton so that you're no longer at a beginner level when you start your new career. If you wanted to combine the two solutions, you could even document the second one and then post that documentary as the first one on your YouTube or your TikTok. But I've never done any of that before, so I have no idea if they would actually work. So what are my final thoughts about Dixie's career? At this point in time, I don't find myself enjoying pretty much any of Dixie's content. I don't think I'll be going back and watching any of it for pleasure, which is fine. I don't have to be her target audience. That's totally okay. I do think that she has a chance of making a long-term career out of her music endeavor. The only thing is that I think it's going to continue to be a really brutal process and a rough road for her, which is what we've already seen. But eventually I can see her making a really good song and having that blow up and everyone be excited a few years down the line. I don't hope that her career is brutal. I really hope that it does go well and that she's not so heavily criticized for much longer. I mean, I can't imagine how exhausting it has been for her. But because of the way that skill building works, I really don't think it's realistic to think that she's going to make any vast improvements anytime soon, and thus I don't think that the criticism is going to die down anytime soon. I think that she's going to have a long road ahead of her of learning how to make music in front of lots of eyes, and that's going to be tough. I'm very curious to see where she goes from here. I don't know what she's going to stick with, if she's going to stick with music long term. She's really young and can change her mind pretty easily. But whatever she chooses to do, whether that is or is not in the public eye, I wish her the best. I really do. And maybe she will end up creating content that I enjoy and which I would be happy to support her in. But with that all being said, you've reached the end of the video. I hope that you enjoyed this. This has been really fun for me. I'm really excited to see how it turns out. I'm feeling very inspired, and hopefully we'll continue to make videos like this. So if you enjoyed this, feel free to like and subscribe so that you can stick around and see more content like this. And with that all being said, thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day.